Now imagine this. It's the 1840s and you're tasked with moving an entire people across the untamed American wilderness. No resources, no clear path, just miles of wild country and hostile forces. You probably haven't heard of Brigham Young, so let me tell you why you should care. Let's start with the numbers. Brigham Young amassed a fortune of more than $450 million despite being born in extreme poverty. He married 56 times and had 57 children by 16 of his wives. He built more than 200 cities, established a dozen business enterprises, and even founded some universities that still exist today. I mean, the guy was prolific. He led 60,000 people, most of them virtually penniless, across the United States on foot and in wagons. He has been called the American Moses, and I think it's an accurate description. Just like Moses, Brigham Young was a religious leader who guided his people through a dangerous wilderness and established a new way of life in an unfamiliar land. This is those who took over the world, exploring the incredible story of Brigham Young, the second prophet of the Mormon Church, and how he took over the world in his own way. His early life, a tough start. Brigham Young was born on June 1, 1801, in Whitingham, Vermont, the 8th of 11 children. America had won its independence less than 20 years earlier, and he truly was a child of the Revolution. His grandfathers fought in the Revolutionary War, but the family's fortunes dwindled over generations due to vices like drinking and gambling. By the time Brigham was born, the Young family was among the poorest in their frontier community. Brigham's childhood was defined by relentless work and deep poverty. His father, John, was sent out as essentially a slave at the age of 6. He was frequently beaten if he didn't perform them adequately. The harshness of life didn't ease in the next generation. Young Brigham spent his days chopping logs, plowing fields barefoot, and sewing rudimentary clothing for himself. His mother, Nabby, contracted tuberculosis early in his life, leaving her bedridden. Her death when Brigham was 15 only deepened his sense of responsibility, pushing him to grow up fast in an already unforgiving world. When Brigham was 15, he and his younger brother were left home alone by their father, who misjudged the amount of food they'd need. The boys ran out of food, and Brigham, showing the toughness that would define him, took the family musket and shot a robin. They boiled and ate it, surviving on that tiny bird until their father returned days later. It was the first glimpse of Brigham's resourcefulness and survival instinct. Brigham would later say, quote, "In my youthful days, instead of going to school, I had to chop logs to sew, to plant, and to plow in the midst of roots, barefooted. And if I had on a pair of pants that would cover, I did pretty well." At 16, his father remarried, and Brigham was told to fend for himself. He headed west to Auburn, New York, a bustling frontier boomtown. There he apprenticed as a carpenter, glazier, and furniture maker, showcasing an early knack for building and problem solving. Brigham even built a mill powered by a river and engineered a paint manufacturing contraption using a cannonball to crush chalk. In 1824, when he was 23, he meets a woman by the name of Miriam Angelina Works, and they hit it off and get married. They have 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Violet, and he settles into typical domestic life of a man on the American frontier in the 1820s. He started hearing whispers about a strange new religion. They were called Mormons, and they followed a charismatic leader named Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith had a background much like Brigham Young. He came from a poor frontier family that moved from Vermont to upstate New York. Like Brigham, he attended many religious revivals and explored Methodist churches but didn't commit to any. In 1820, at just 14, Joseph said he had a vision of God in Jesus Christ. Later, he claimed an angel named Moroni led him to buried golden plates that contained the history and teachings of an ancient American people who had been wiped out by a rival tribe. He translated these plates with God's help, creating the Book of Mormon. The book said these ancient people had been visited by Jesus after his resurrection and had known about Christianity long before Europeans arrived. Joseph also claimed God told him that Christianity had become corrupted and chose him to restore the original teachings. He received revelations about how this new church should be organized, attracting both followers and skeptics. This bold new religion stirred excitement and controversy in upstate New York, not far from where Brigham Young lived. Brigham's older brothers converted first, but true to his nature, Brigham didn't jump in right away. He took over a year to investigate, watching from the sidelines as his family joined this new faith. Finally, one day, he was struck by what he called a glory of God moment while discussing the religion with his family. That was it. He was in. Shortly after, he was baptized, plunging into the icy waters of the spring without hesitation. His conviction would only grow from here. Brigham and his Mormon ascension. Again, for the first 32 years of his life, Brigham Young lived an ordinary frontier life. But everything changed when he converted to Mormonism. After his wife passed away, Brigham was left heartbroken and struggling to care for his daughters alone. Yet he found hope and purpose in his new faith. Determined to dedicate his life to it, he left his daughters with close friends, gave up his business, and became a traveling missionary, preaching the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. On one of his trips, Brigham traveled to Kirtland, Ohio, to meet Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church. He expected Joseph to be a mysterious, otherworldly figure, but instead found a strong, practical man chopping wood. Brigham admired Joseph's strength and straightforwardness, and later said, "He took heaven and brought it down to earth." This meeting solidified Brigham's devotion. Brigham became a hard-working missionary, traveling from town to town and baptizing many converts. Though he wasn't highly educated, his sincerity and fiery passion inspired people. In time, he was called to move to Kirtland to help build a new community for the church. There, he married again, reunited with his daughters, and worked on building the Kirtland Temple, a sacred structure central to their faith. But the church faced constant challenges. In Missouri, tensions rose as non-Mormon settlers felt threatened by the growing Mormon community. Violence broke out, leading to harsh persecution and an infamous extermination order from the Missouri governor, forcing the Mormons to leave the state. Brigham stepped up to lead the massive migration, organizing food, shelter, and transportation for thousands. His leadership and careful planning saved countless lives during the difficult journey to Illinois. In Illinois, the Mormons built a new city, Nauvoo, and Brigham continued his work as a leader, builder, and preacher. He even traveled to England, where he helped baptize thousands and organized efforts to bring converts back to America. But trouble followed the Mormons once more. Joseph Smith's radical teachings, including plural marriage, created divisions within the church, and non-Mormon neighbors grew hostile. The tension led to Joseph Smith being killed by a mob in 1844, while imprisoned on charges related to destroying a press that criticized his teachings. It was now time to find the new next leader of the church. Brigham's rise to power. When Joseph Smith was murdered by a mob in 1844, the future of the Mormon Church hung in the balance. The founder and prophet of the movement was gone, and his followers were lost. Rival leaders started making moves, but Brigham had other ideas. The crucial moment came when Sidney Rigdon, one of the senior leaders of the church, tried to take control. He arranged a meeting to pitch himself as the guardian of the church, suggesting that the days of prophecy were over. Just as Sidney was wrapping up, Brigham arrived unannounced. In dramatic fashion, he stepped onto the stage and took control of the situation. He delivered a fiery speech, arguing that it wasn't about guardianship, it was about leadership. The apostles, he claimed, held the real authority to carry on Joseph Smith's vision. One famous moment that sealed the deal. Brigham turned to the crowd and said, "Do you want a guardian or do you want a leader? Do you want a cook and bottle washer or someone who will carry forward the work of the Lord?" The crowd erupted in applause, and the vote was nearly unanimous. Brigham Young had taken control. The Great Migration, leading 60,000 across the wild. Now imagine this. It's the 1840s, and you're tasked with moving an entire people across the untamed American wilderness. No resources, no clear path, just miles of wild country and hostile forces. This is where Brigham's leadership really shines. Brigham raised funds by convincing wealthy Mormons in other areas to donate. He then organized a mass exodus from Missouri to Illinois, and later to the Salt Lake Valley in Utah. Here's where things get legendary. In 1846, the Mormon pioneers set out on their journey westward. They had to navigate treacherous terrain, build temporary shelters, and fend off disease. One powerful example, during the brutal winter at winter quarters near Omaha, Nebraska, hundreds of Mormons were stricken with disease and malnutrition. Brigham started organizing relief, food, and care for the sick in ways no one thought was possible. His attention to logistics and the care for his people saved countless lives. When they finally reached the Salt Lake Valley in 1847, Brigham stood atop a rise, looked over the barren land, and declared, "This is the place." In that moment, Brigham didn't just find a new home for his people, he planted the seeds of a future empire. Salt Lake City would become the hub of a thriving new community, a new civilization in the West. Brigham Young wasn't just content with finding a new home, he wanted to build a new world. He established over 200 cities and towns, each one meticulously planned. Salt Lake City in particular became his masterpiece. He designed it like a Sim City game. Yes, seriously. Laying out roads, creating irrigation systems, and organizing industries. One of his most radical ideas, a completely self-sustaining community where the Mormon people could thrive independently of outside forces. Brigham's foresight was uncanny. For instance, when gold was discovered in in California in 1848, a mass of settlers and miners began flooding the West. Many saw the chaotic gold rush as an opportunity, but Brigham kept his people focused on building infrastructure and stability. The railroads, businesses, and agriculture he developed outlasted the boom and bust cycle of the gold rush and cemented the Mormons' lasting influence in the region. Then he went on to found universities, including what is now Brigham Young University, one of the top universities in the U.S. But perhaps his boldest move came with his controversial decision to embrace polygamy, a doctrine that would shape the church's public perception for generations. While divisive, Brigham believed that plural marriage was a divine commandment, and he lived that belief fully, marrying dozens of wives and fathering many children. By the time of his death in 1877, Brigham Young had built an empire in the desert. His leadership, vision, and determination had turned a group of outcasts into a self-sufficient, thriving society. He truly was the American Moses. The power of vision. Brigham Young's story isn't just about religion. It's about leadership, vision, and the power of determination. If you're looking to take over the world yourself, this might be a good blueprint. From a poor boy in Vermont to the leader of a powerful movement, Brigham showed that bold action and relentless faith can shape history. Today, the legacy of his work is all around us, in cities, schools, roads, and communities that still bear the mark of his genius. I don't agree with his teachings personally, but I respect greatness when I see it.